The Ransom of Mercy Carter, Chapter 8. Kanawake, August 1704. Temperature 75 degrees. By summer, Kanawake children had stopped wearing clothing. Mercy could not get over the sight of hundreds of naked children playing tag or hide-and-seek or competing in foot races. The boys, naked, went into the woods to shoot squirrels and rabbits and partridge. They used bow and arrow since their fathers did not like them using guns yet. Even the 6- and 7-year-olds had excellent aim. Joseph didn't go entirely bare, being a little too old, but wore a beach clout, a small square of deerskin in the back and another square in front, laced on a slender cord. The boys played constantly. They were stalking, shooting, running, chasing, aiming, fishing, swimming. They never sat down. The men, however, mainly rested. They liked to smoke and talk, and when they were showing a son or a nephew or captive how to feather an arrow or find ducks, they did it slowly and sometimes forgot about it in the middle. A Puritan man must rise before dawn and never take his ease. Puritans believe in working hard, but for an Indian man, working hard is something to do for an hour or a week. After he killed the moose or fought the battle, an Indian took his ease. Hunting men and animals was dangerous. He deserved rest afterward, and besides, he had to prepare himself to do it again. A Deerfield man didn't risk much plowing a field. A Kanawake man risked everything, going into a cave to rouse a sleeping bear. Please stop here and answer question 1. Mercy was outdoors more than she had ever been. She had thought that after the horrifying journey of ice and snow, she would never want the outdoors again, but spring and summer were joy. "You're not joyful because you love the outdoors," said Ruth. "It's because you don't have to be afraid of the Indians anymore. Anything they could do, they've already done." Ruth was in a terrible mood because Ransom had never arrived. Joanna said Ruth was in exactly the same mood she had always been in, and if only fire would eat Ruth, everybody would be happier. Every night Mercy obeyed her Uncle Nathaniel and remembered. She was careful about it, though. Some memories must not be taken out, or they brought on homesickness. It hurt to pull up the misty image of her mother sitting on the loom, smiling as the pattern of her weaving appeared. She did like to remember her father's deep voice as he read the Bible, working his way through all 66 books and then starting over as soon as he finished. She would remember the children falling asleep in laps, flames casting soft shadows over beloved faces. Her memories were sweet and warm. But when she shared this with Ruth, she demanded, "Tell me one thing sweet and warm about the attack." Ruth was lucky to see things clearly. Mercy was losing track of who had done what to whom. Every day it seemed less important to remember the attack. Memory was passing away like morning fog, first gray, then clear, then gone. Father Muriel called this forgiveness. Ruth called it forgetting, and she called it evil. Please stop here and answer question 2. Mercy always knew that they were not living in ordinary Indian ways. Her Indians were Frenchified. They were Catholic. But before any of that, they were Indian and carried with them the ancient feuds of their tribes, especially during ball games, when the men bet so much and played so hard the teams divided along tribal lines. Mercy would feel, between the Abenaki, the Mohawk, and the Huron, history she did not have and did not want to have. She was always relieved when the ball games were over. They generally ended in laughter, payment of bets, men's arms around each other's shoulders as they went off the field, but not always. There were times when the tempers on the playing field were tempers on a battlefield, and Mercy would pray for peace. More often, she just wasn't home. In summer, Indian women rambled as much as the men. They wandered far afield for every berry in its season. They foraged for birds' eggs and tasty greens. They went night fishing in creeks, one holding the torch to bring the fish to the surface, another perched on the rocks to spear the fish when it rose to the light. When they came home, they weeded among the pumpkins and fat dark beans and rows of tobacco. There was no end to the sewing, any more than there had been in Deerfield. Mercy learned to shape moccasins and get a needle through thick bear fur to make a hat. She learned how to paint designs on hides, to embroider with European beads or with shells and feathers. She would sit outside, cross-legged like Nestetta, enjoying the patient labor and needlework and the yellow heat of the sun. Women and girls continued to wear skirts, but tunics were stored for the summer. All the girls and women were bare-chested. "There's no place you can look without seeing them," said Ruth grumpily. Mercy thought about taking off her tunic in public, but she didn't. Eunice Williams did, but she was little. Joanna was ready to do it, but she told Mercy she would wait until Ruth was not around to scold. All the Indian boys and some of the girls loved to swim. They stayed away from the rough currents of the St. Lawrence and spent hours every day splashing in the shallows. "Come, Monadnock," said Snow Walker. I'll teach you. We swim like dogs, and dogs do not sink. You'll like the water. You'll feel sleek as an otter. She took Mercy's hand. Come, sister. Mercy, warned Ruth. When she calls you sister, you remember your real sister. Do you hear me? Your dead sister. Please stop here and answer question 3. It was worth going into the water, just to get away from Ruth's nagging. Mercy waded in, appalled by how cold it was. Snow Walker towed her around for a minute and then let go. At first, Mercy couldn't take 2 strokes without having to stand up and reassure herself that there was a bottom, but soon she could swim 10 and then 20 strokes. Joseph, who had been swimming with the boys, paddled over to admire her new skill. Snow Walker coaxed them to put their heads under the water and swim like fish. Mercy loved it. Wiping river water from her eyes and laughing, she shouted, Come on in, Joanna. In front of Snow Walker, she spoke Mohawk. It feels so cool and slippery inside the water. Joanna shook her head. I can't see where I'm going on land. I don't want to be blind in water over my head. Ruth, yelled Joseph in English so she'd answer. Try it. I won't pull you under by the toes, I promise. Savages swim, said Ruth. English people walk or ride horses. By now, Mercy had flown her tunic onto the grass and was bare as everybody else. When Ruth scolded, Mercy ducked under the water and stayed there until the yelling was over. Just wait till you get out, Mercy, said Ruth. The mosquitoes are going to feast on your wet, bare skin. Mercy translated for Snow Walker, who said, No, we grease to keep the mosquitoes away. Joseph, of course, had been greasing for weeks, but so far Mercy had not submitted. Ruth, unwilling to see Mercy slather bear fat over her nakedness, stalked away. Good, said Snow Walker, giggling. The fire is out. We are safe now. Mercy was startled. I never heard you use her old name. I don't call her Let the Sky In, explained Snow Walker. She would let nothing in but storms. Please stop here and answer question 4. Snow Walker is not such a fence post after all, thought Mercy. Snow Walker, why have they given Ruth such a fine new name? I don't know. One day at a feast, the story will be told. They'll have to gag Ruth before they tell it, said Joseph. She hates her new name even more than she hated her old one. They got out of the water, racing in circles to dry off, and then Snow Walker rubbed bear grease all over Mercy. I can't see you from here, Monadnock, said Joanna, but I can smell you. Want some? Said Mercy, planning to attack with a scoop of bear grease, but Joanna left for the safety of the cornfields and her mother. Snow Walker went back in to join a waterfall game. The 2 white captives were momentarily alone. They switched into English. Mercy, said Joseph very quietly, I am going to be adopted. She almost congratulated him. It was what he wanted. He loved Great Sky, and Great Sky loved him, but everyone said if you were adopted, you would not be ransomed home. Don't tell Ruth, Joseph, said Mercy anxiously. She'll think you had a choice. In fact, a captive was not asked whether he wished to be adopted. It was the decision of the captive's owner. Father Muriel wants me to be baptized Catholic at the same time. Mercy swallowed. You do have a choice about that, Joseph. You must refuse. You would go to hell, you know it. Father Muriel says Catholics do too save their souls, and I like Mass. His almost Indian face stared into hers. So do you, Mercy. Last Sunday, a visiting priest had taught the congregation a long, slow repeating chant in Latin called De Deum. 400 Indians sang it together, and Mercy's heart nearly burst at the beauty of the men's voices. The Deerfield frontier had been hard, and God had not made it easier. Just when the sky seemed blue, the children sweet, and the crop good, God would fling hail at the corn and smallpox at the babies. But the French God slipped like a strong shadow behind the path of the Indian spirits. He was a gentler God. In Deerfield, Mercy had been taught to fear the Lord. Father Muriel wanted her to love the Lord. Still, for Joseph to become Catholic? I will keep the name I was given on the trail, said Joseph. Sawanjan. Eagle, repeated Mercy. It was an honorable name. Because from the beginning I was brave, said Joseph. It is so, said Mercy, and realized that she and Joseph had gone back to Mohawk. What would Ruth say if she found out Mercy's thoughts were in Mohawk? In that language, the words eagle and adoption had a beauty and a resonance that made Mercy tremble. And my real mother, thought Mercy, what would she say if she knew that my head spins with Indian words, that I like Mass, that I'm happy for Joseph? Please stop here and answer question 5. An elm bark canoe drew up to the stone jetty, and the captives turned as always to see who it was. 3 white men. Not priests, nor were they dressed like fur traders. 2 stepped easily out of the rocking narrow boat. French officers, Mercy decided, but not in parade dress, just long guns slung over their shoulders. Dugouts were so solid you could jump up and down inside the well of the boat, but canoes tipped, and passengers not used to a canoe were terrified of being dumped into the river to drown. The 3rd man, definitely afraid of the canoe, had to be helped out. Joseph gasped. "Mercy," he whispered, "it's Mr. Williams." The minister wore French clothing, of course. His real clothing hadn't lasted so many months. But how familiar he looked! How right! How English! In a moment Mercy would hear his voice, listen to his blessing. All her questions would be answered. Mr. Williams knew everything. Shouting and laughing, Mercy and Joseph raced along the river, across the stones, and onto the jetty. "It's me, Mercy Carter! Oh, Mr. Williams, do you have news?" She flung herself on top of him. Oh, his beautiful beard! The beard of a real father, not a pretend Indian father or a French church father. "My brothers," she begged. "John and Sam and Benny. Have you seen them? Have you heard anything about them? Do you know what happened to the little ones? Daniel, have you found Daniel?" Mercy had forgotten that she had taken off her tunic to go swimming, that Joseph did not even have on his beach clout, that Mercy wore earrings and Joseph had been tattooed on his upper arms, that they stank of bear. Mr. Williams did not recognize Joseph, and Mercy he knew only by the color of her hair. He was stupefied by the 2 naked, slimy children trying to hug him. In more horror than even Ruth could have mustered, he whispered, "Your parents would be weeping. What have the savages done to you? You are animals!" Despair and shock molted Mr. Williams's face. Mercy stumbled back from him. Her bear grease stained his clothing. "Mercy," he said, turning away from her, "go cover yourself." Shame covered her first. Red patches flamed on her cheeks. She ran back to the swimmers, fighting sobs. She was aware of her bare feet, hard as leather from no shoes. Savage feet. "Dear Lord in heaven," thought Mercy, "Ruth is right. I have committed terrible sins. My parents would be weeping." Please stop here and answer question 6. She did not look at Snow Walker, but yanked on the deerskin tunic. She had tanned the hide herself, and she and Nestena had painted the row of turtles around the neckline, and Nestena had tied tiny tinkling French bells onto the fringe. But it was still just animal skin. To be wearing hides in front of Mr. Williams was not much better than being naked. Snow Walker burst out of the water. "The white man, was he cruel? I will call Tana Horns." No, Tana Horns would not let her speak to Mr. Williams. She would never find out about her brothers, never redeem herself in the minister's eyes. Mercy calmed down with the discipline of living among Indians. Running had shown weakness. "Thank you, Snow Walker," she said, striving to be gracious, "but he merely wanted me to be clothed like an English girl. There is no need to call Tana Horns." She walked back. On the jetty, Joseph stood with his eyes fixed on the river instead of on his minister. He had not fled like Mercy to cover himself. He was standing his ground. "These aren't savages, Mr. Williams, and they aren't just Indians. Those children over there are Abenaki. The boy fishing by the rocks is Penacook, and my own family is Kanawake Mohawk." Tears sprang into Mr. Williams's eyes. "What do you mean, your family?" he said. "Joseph, you do not have a family in this terrible place. You have a master. Do not confuse savages who have given you food with family." Joseph's face hardened. "They are my family. My father is Great Sky. My mother—" The minister lost his temper. "Your father is Martin Kellogg," he shouted, "with whom I just dined in Montreal. You refer to some savage as your father? I am ashamed of you." Under his tan, Joseph paled, and his Indian calm left him. He was trembling. My father? Alive? You saw him?" "Your father is a field hand for a French family in Montreal. He works hard, Joseph. He has no choice. But you have choices. Have you chosen to abandon your father?" Joseph swallowed and wet his lips. "No." He could barely get the syllable out. "Don't cry," prayed Mercy. "Be an eagle." She fixed her eyes upon him, giving him all her strength, but Mr. Williams continued to destroy whatever strength the 13-year-old possessed. "Your father prays for the day you and he will be ransomed, Joseph. All he thinks of is the moment he can gather his beloved family back under his own roof. Is that not also your prayer, Joseph? Joseph stared down the wide St. Lawrence in the direction of Montreal. He was fighting for composure and losing. Each breath shuddered visibly through his ribs. Please stop here and answer question 7. The Indian men who never seemed to do anything but smoke and lounge around joined them silently. How runty the French looked next to the 6-foot Indians. How gaudy and ridiculous their ruffled and buckled clothing. The Indians were not painted, and they wore almost nothing. Neither were they armed, and yet they came as warriors. 2 of their children were threatened. It could not be tolerated. Tom Horns put one hand on Joseph's shoulder and the other on Mercy's. He was not ordering them around, and yet he did not seem to be protecting them. It was, he dawned on Mercy, comforting them. In Tom Horns's eyes, we are Indian children, thought Mercy. Her hair prickled and her skin turned to goose flesh. She had spent the summer forgetting to be English, and Tana Horns had spent the summer forgetting the same thing. Snowwalker joined the group, now wearing a skirt. In Mr. Williams's eyes, of course, she was still naked. But Mr. Williams saw only the gathering men. He forgot Mercy and Joseph. My daughter, he said eagerly. My little girl, Eunice Williams. I know you have her here. I must see her. Bring her to me. He wants news of Eunice as intensely as I crave news of my brothers, thought Mercy. He wants to hold Eunice and talk to her and know that she is well. She thought of her real father, whom she could forget for days at a time. Somewhere on this earth, he too was desperate for news about his children. The French officers interpreted Mr. Williams's request to the Kanawake. Ayongot is with her mother, said Cold Sun. No, no, Eunice, said Mr. Williams loudly. My daughter, my little girl. Ayongot is with her mother. Her name is Eunice. His voice was strained and high-pitched. He sounded like Ruth, and like Ruth, he would not ask for a translation of Ayongot. He would not believe an Indian name could have meaning. If he did know, his pain would only increase, for Ayongot meant planted. The black-haired, red-cheeked English girl would grow where she was planted, here in Kanawake. I demand to see her, said Mr. Williams in his pulpit voice, the syllables ringing out over the jetty in the river. I am her father. Cold Sun had refused. He could not understand why Mr. Williams continued to ask. Nevertheless, he said once more, Ayongot is with her mother. Her mother, said Mr. Williams, was murdered by you. Wisely, the French did not interpret this. There was a pause. The warriors were motionless. The French were fidgety. The children were afraid, and the minister lost heart. I am her father, pleaded Mr. Williams. Let me see my little girl. He held out his hands to the warriors as a kneeler in mass begs for a blessing. Mercy's heart broke for Mr. Williams. If she could rest her eyes upon her brothers and know that they could smile and were among friends, she too could rest her heart. So Mercy said to the minister, Eunice is fine. They treat her well. She has Joanna Kellogg to play with and 2 best Indian friends already. I haven't really made any Indian friends, but people are nice to me. He stared at her as if she had been speaking Mohawk. My brothers, she reminded him. Sam and John and Benny, have you any news? He stared longingly into Kanawake. No laughing, red-cheeked little girl ran toward him. He said wearily, Your brother Sam is with the Indians in Lorette. He lives near Eben Nims. I have indeed spoken with him. I sorrow at how he falls into Indian ways. Your brother John has been taken by a French family. He becomes more French and more Catholic every day. Already he answers to the name Jean. Mercy yearned to confide in him and tell him how hard they were all trying, how blurry the situation was. If only she could be alone with him and pour out her heart. She struggled, wondering how to explain their lives, but he burst out, A new name is the first step in seizing your soul. Do not let them give you a name, Mercy. When the French can think of no other name for a girl, they use Marie. Do not yield. You are English. You are white. You are Puritan. You will be ransomed. We will go home. I am confident that the Lord is with us still. Marie, Mananoc, sister, daughter. Mercy answered to all these names, but she did not answer Mr. Williams. Finally, she said, And my brother Benny? The French soldiers were withdrawing. Mr. Williams had not noticed. Benny is supposed to be with an Indian family near Fort Chambly. I have not been there, nor seen him. He looked over Mercy's head, searching once more for Eunice. Please stop here and answer question 8. And little Daniel? Asked Mercy. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Oh, the horror of it, to be 3 years old and have nobody know where you are. And then she thought, but somebody does know where Daniel is. 9 warriors took Daniel. One of them surely gave him an Indian mother. Somebody somewhere is caring for Daniel. And Mr. Williams hates it, but many here are caring for his daughter, too. You've seen Sarah Hoyt, then? She said, and Eben? Sarah was in Lorette briefly, but she's been purchased by a French family. She, too, is in Montreal. Thankfully, she is not yielding to the Catholic pressure. How scary for Sarah. A new world and a new language for the 3rd time in half a year? Mercy was grateful that Tana Horns and Estena had kept her. A French officer punched Mr. Williams lightly on the arm and said cheerfully, Monsieur, we return another day, eh? He bowed slightly to the assembled warriors. How careful the French were, so outnumbered. Perhaps, thought Mercy, they wonder if they were not wise to sell guns to Indians who were their enemies, not so many years ago, but who now live beside the French, enter the French church and speak the French language. No wonder the French stay in Montreal and have made it a fortress. With any misstep, Indian allies could revert to being the enemy. Mr. Williams embraced the 2 children. Mercy savored the touch of his hands. Joseph remained as rigid as the wood of a dugout. The Lord is with you, said Mr. Williams, and then roughly, as though he would shake them like puppies if the warriors were not so close. But when they force you to go to Mass, do not repeat their prayers. Never touch a cross. They don't force, said Joseph, and we do repeat the prayers. We go every day, said Mercy anxiously. We say the Lord's Prayer in Latin. Father Muriel says it's the same prayer. He lies. A Catholic priest skulks behind his religion as Indians skulk behind trees. Mercy bent her head for Mr. Williams' blessing, having forgotten that only Father Muriel painted the cross in the air. Sometimes when Mercy left Mass, she could feel the cross hovering over her, but Mr. Williams did not bless her. He pushed Mercy away for the 2nd time and said harshly to Joseph, I expect weakness in girls, but if you enter a Catholic church, your weakness shames us all. Please stop here and answer question 9. Again, the interpreter knew better than to interpret. Instead, he guided Mr. Williams toward the canoe. The Englishman climbed in awkwardly, supported on both sides by French officers, and then put Mr. Williams, Harvard graduate and minister, put his head in his hands and wept for the daughter he had not been allowed to see. He did not look back at Mercy and Joseph. He had never asked if they were all right. She felt gray and hopeless. The Lord bless you and keep you, Mr. Williams, she called, but he did not hear her over the splashing of paddles, and it was Joseph who smiled gently. And suddenly, Mercy knew the Lord to be all things and all languages, Mohawk, French, English, Latin. The Lord did not mind what name Mercy used as long as she used it well. She did not think he cared whether she answered to Marie or to Monadnock or to daughter. He cared if she kept the commandments. Honor thy mother and father, thought Mercy. Have I broken that commandment? She clung tightly to Tana Horns' hand, trying to discern the truth. Snowwalker spit where Mr. Williams had stood. Please stop here and answer question 10.